Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. I'm going to take a deep dive into some code associated with HAXcms. Had two questions come up recently, well, three, but we'll start to step through some of them. So first one has to do with the idea of superclasses. So I usually refer to this as like class mix-ins or element mix-ins. There's this cool concept in Polymer called behaviors, and Polymer enabled you to build a web component and do it with less, just like less overhead. Like you implement this thing, and then you mix in a little bit of additional context and you're good. So you're writing less code, it's providing a bunch of scaffolding. Well, the behaviors concept let you kind of mix in pieces of an element. And so now you don't have to use something specific to their way of doing it. This is something you can use in JavaScript here. So let's look at an example. This is the way, what we're going to step through is this is the way we build our themes. So the theme layer in HAXcms is friggin' gorgeous. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of a design pattern I've just stumbled on through playing. So let's take a look at our slide theme. So a slide theme is a custom element. So you theme HAXcms by making custom elements. And so you'll see, hey, class slide theme extends Polymer element, but then there's this, which is a little weird. So this is the SuperClass inheritance. So you're basically, if I was to read this, it's like make a new class that extends Polymer element, but mix this other stuff into it. So that is coming from the theme wiring in HAXcms core element set. So let's look at what that is. So there's HAXcms theme right here. And so this is a mix-in class to automatically apply HAXcms theme state. Fancy. So you pass into it a superclass, and then you'll see it says return class extends superclass. So it's kind of like, it's on the fly. This is kind of like a function that's like extending this element, or class definition, I should say. I keep saying element because I'm doing custom elements, but you could do this in JavaScript. So you'll see here, I go, okay, well, mix into this, so this is like a piece of an element that we're going to mix into a Polymer element, and then we're going to mix our stuff into that. So I say, okay, well, constructor super, which fires the other constructor, and then turn on the theme wiring. So theme wiring is a standalone class. Then we go, okay, well, there's some properties that we want mixed into this. So it's kind of like you're thinking of like, what is the archetype of a theme for HAXcms? So I want all of the themes to have this capability, and I want you to write one line of code in order to get this as a base layer. So every theme is going to need to know whether or not you're editing. They're going to need to know where the content container is as a DOM node. And they're going to need to know something about the location, like what page we're currently visiting. So you see, whenever we change state with edit mode, see we have an observer here. This is some Polymer syntax. These are the niceties of Polymer that really I just love using it for. Go, okay, well, when edit mode changes, just run this function. I don't need to do any of the vanilla JS attribute observation callback stuff. So okay, well, run a micro task, fake a resize of the screen, and then update styles. This is a basic thing just to ensure that whenever we go into edit mode that everything looks correct. So here's the real important thing though. So content container changed. So now what this is reflective of in HAXcms. So let's look at something using the slide theme. Might have to switch a. Okay, good, that has it on. I didn't think it would. All right, so when Hax just showed up right there, that is the piece of the operation that we're at right now. So content container changed implies that something has, in the theme, has said, hey, put Hax here. And so if I inspect, and come over here, dig into the shadow roots, right? So in the DOM we have the site builder tag, and the site builder tag has all the guts that figures out whether or not we're loading something. It has our router, it has the ability to load the manifest to get this system set up. Then the slide theme is the theme, and so inside of it we'll see we have a active slide, and then you're in every HAXcms theme at the moment you're going to get something like this. It's going to be ID equals content container, and then ID equals slot. Now you can change these, but they're just kind of the convention I've fallen on here. So let's look at where that is in the slide theme. In the slide theme I have some CSS. Here's another good reason to normalize and have those abstractions for certain properties, right? So this is edit mode. So as just a basic convention, I go, well, when you're editing, hide the content itself. We'll get to why in a minute here. So let's scroll down. Okay. There it is. Okay. So content container and slot. Now the reason that I have it mapped out this way is, if we look in the wiring, we search for content container, we see that we have a connected callback. Now this is going to fire when the element has been attached to the DOM. So again, I'm still in my SuperClass here. I'm saying mix into whatever you've been passed, calling the connected callback, callbacks that existed before me, and then if there's no content container, which then allows the theme layer to actually dynamically define this, which is a big deal. I'll show an example of that. Then we're going to set it to a shadow root query selector of content container. So this becomes our default, which means, okay, we've mixed into our slide theme, right? We can assume that functionality is all here, all that state, just via that, which is pretty impressive. And then whenever this gets attached to the DOM, this is now the shadow root I'm operating within. So it's going to go down and it's going to go query selector. Oh, content container, found it. So then we're going to have content container set here, which then when content container changes, and then disconnected callback, I delete it. When content container changes, it is going to observe that it has changed, right? And we're going to have an object, a DOM node reference. And so now I know that the new value is going to be the DOM node as to where I should place the HAX editing interface. So we're going to say, okay, well, was this connected previously? If it wasn't, right, this is the first paint of the site. And then we're going to invoke the theme wiring, and we're going to pass in a reference to the object we're working on, and then that specific DOM node in the theme wiring. Now, if I look at what connect does, we'll see we have an element and then an injector. And so this gets pretty deep in the weeds of how this thing sets up. But effectively it says, hey, global state, which I need to switch over to actually use the store, but hey, global state, do we have a site editor? Which would imply that, so I'm in this page. To witness the difference here, I'm going to open a incognito tab, and I'm going to go to the same thing. No editing experience. So why that happened is because there's no backend defined. And now I'd say, but I mean, this site is powered by somewhere. What the heck is going on right there? Well, during its spin-up process, if you will, there's this JWT connection series thing, this like stuff under the hood that basically wires everything up as far as connecting it to something real. So part of that process, when the whole system is standing itself up in its life cycle, is it's going to go and try to figure out, because if you look at any of the index.htmls, they all just reference Site Builder. Site Builder is going to attempt to figure out, based on the existence and validation of a JSON web token, whether or not there's an editor. So you see I reference editor builder, and we're just going to create editor builder, and it goes into the DOM. So whenever the system sets up, as far as what you see, right, whenever you get this loaded, it then, during its attached life cycle, or connected, sorry, is going to leave a reference behind to the editor builder. So this allows us to get a faster first paint, but then also ensures that it's going to start to go through and bootstrap, trying to get hacks in there if the user should see it. So editor builder then, we go over to editor builder, editor builder is going to set that global singleton, which again I'll switch over to a store at some point. And and it's going to go through and it's going to attempt to figure out context. And so this tag is going to go, all right, well, what is the current context I'm installed in? This is going to get pretty trippy, I assure you. But via some just very basic global constants, right, which would get written in by the backend, we can figure out how HAXcms is installed currently. So, for example, if there's a class called .archive, I know that HAXcms is being run in Beaker browser, and then I can alter at runtime the way at which we do the lookup for whether or not you are currently logged in. It's kind of crazy. So if it's published, it just says, hey, I'm published, and that kind of skips a lot of checks and balances. Then we've got support for the future to say, like, well, is the backend Node.js? Because then we should attach a tag that knows how to communicate correctly with Node.js endpoints. So effectively, this is our little router for figuring out, do we have a PHP backend? Do we have a Node.js backend? Are we a static site entirely? Are we in a demo state, which I had to put in just because of the way this works? That's how Hax, the web.org works. It's trying to dynamically figure out what it's connected to so it can figure out how to latch onto it. I want the code base to be identical, no matter if you have a Node backend or a PHP backend or Golang. I really don't care what you're talking to. There's really not going to be a lot of difference on the front end. But I do want it to be the same. I don't want there to be other libraries you have to get to set this stuff up. That way you can swap out backends seamlessly, plug and play. So that is going to then, let's take the case of PHP. That's what we're looking at here. So when this tag sets up, it's going to apply context, which gets the current context and goes, oh, I found PHP. And then it's going to just forcibly append this HAXcms-jwt.php into the page, which when we do that, if I were to go to that in here, you'll see I get these. This is kind of the rules of the road. This is how to connect and talk to this backend. If it was Node.js, right, Node.js would be doing something entirely different. If it's a demo, it doesn't call this file. But effectively, this is setting these global app settings so that the system can figure out what to do from there. So, and those are visualizing here, they're coming from the backend. So now that we've got that availability, that's going to figure out like, oh, hey, you told me what the login endpoint is. I'm going to ask it if there's a valid JSON web token right now in the user's local storage bin. It validates that local storage bin JSON web token, and then that's why when I go to this in this tab, it works, and when I went to it in the incognito window, I didn't get an authoring experience. This allows us to do some rather absurd stuff, like push these tags out to production, and then not have to worry about any of the performance headaches, implications, or security associated with backends and routes and all of that fun stuff using the same code. So let's go back to slide 3. So let's say that it actually did find an editor and requested availability. Connect is then going to run through a bunch of stuff that's effectively going to inject on the fly what we see here as HAXcms site editor. And so with HAXcms site editor there, you'll see that ends up doing routes that has that HAX tag in it. That then steps through and is effectively managing all of Hax and everything that goes into that area there. So, there's a meme tag here. This isn't a one-to-one with that. What you're seeing is the content that's in the slot of the theme, right? So there they are. Right? So there's the light DOM asset. And so the reason we do this is that when you change the global state for edit mode, it has now dynamically hidden those light DOM nodes and then presented Hax, which was always there, and it was injected at the right point because of that SuperClass we told it to connect to it. So that then when I hit save, it's just refreshing that light DOM series of nodes. So this is kind of some of the crazier stuff we're doing with this as far as theming. So we're taking all of the state management out of theming, and I can refactor this even further now. Some other neat little things like whenever the active item gets updated, we're using mobx, which I can't recommend highly enough. I actually have to switch those over to mobx. It's a disposer. There we go, my disposers. And so as we tie into our state management via mobx, we'll get the router and then siphon off of the router information like, hey, what are those CSS variables we should use? Set those globally. Hey, get the location set, pull in the location. And so whenever the global location changes, which is the equivalent of, clicking a button and having the URL change, this then jumps in and says, oh, hey, location changed. Let's react to location changed. Let's figure out if we're on a valid route. If we're not on a valid route, let's set it to the first item in our store. So in all of HAXcms, you're always just interfacing with the active ID. And honestly, in the theme layer, you really shouldn't need to understand what state management is. That's kind of what we're going for when wrapping in with web components. So all of that logic, all of the updating the domain name and the understanding state and route and connecting the editor in appropriately, that is all boiled up into a superclass, which then when we leverage it, we just wrap it on. The other awesome thing about that is that if this was, say, HTML element, right, as opposed to a Polymer element, like a vanilla class, this allows us to extend and mix in capabilities no matter what the library that you use is for your getting web components. So to be clear, we haven't done any in any other libraries yet, but it sets us up for that. So now here is my template for that page. I mentioned state management, and this specific theme has a little bit of state management in it, but not a ton, to be perfectly honest. So the state management has to do with the store. And so anytime you see store dot in any HAXcms themes, you're doing something that's going to be pulling in and having to manage state. Now, the store is pretty easy to connect to and interface with because of mobx. So effectively, I just do an auto run, have a reaction, and then I say this dot, and in this case, it's whatever property in my element that I want to basically be bound to changes in the store. Mobx is going to figure out anytime router manifest changes, or sorry, .items.length. Anytime that changes, it's going to notify and update this variable here, which then down in my theme I can leverage. So what I'm doing in the case of both of these, and it's kind of silly, I might make something that does this, but effectively I'm tying into the store so that I can build you a little counter that says you're on page 7 of 15. That's all that's doing. Now to witness the state change in action, if I do outline and do that, there we go. It updated instantly. As you probably saw, it went to 11 out of 16 from 10 out of 15. So it knew where I was in the flow in order to place that page correctly and give me this nice counting up and back experience. When you're tied into mobx, I just can't stress enough, one, how fast this stuff is when tied in with web components, but also just how painless it is. Every element basically talks to a single object in mobx or a property in mobx. And so then whenever any of them change, everybody else gets notified instantly. So then everyone's just responsible for reacting to those changes. So that when I click through these different buttons or when I click this, right, everything is effectively changing active ID. And so when active ID shifts, everything else just occurs. It's kind of ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. So that is the only state management. If I took out that counter, there would be no state management happening in the slide theme. And the reason that's possible is because of the way that we're doing our theme assets, or like components that containerize state. So they're all included in our UI components directory here in HAXcms. So let's look at one of these, like site menu button. So there's going to be under UI components site, navigation. So navigation and then site menu button. So what we're doing is we're establishing ultra smart but visually dumb elements that do pretty much all of the complex things of a website for you. So this is site menu button. So let's step through what a site menu button actually does. Site menu button visually is going to be that button right there, that forward and back. And if that looks at all similar, it's because it is literally the same button as is used in so many of the other themes that we've kicked out in our short history here. So that previous and next page button is the same, so that when I click it, it goes to the next page. In the dev theme, it's available there. In the simple blog, it's all the way at the bottom, and you can see it. Yes, there are still some blemishes as far as CSS maintaining whenever the DOM gets blown up there. But if I refresh on it, it'll be fine. So it's the same button. It's like the same exact tag. How we're doing that is let's look at what that tag does. So that tag has a template, right? It has a disabled state. It has a link, paper button, icon, and a tooltip, and that's it. I am heavily leveraging CSS variables and these apply blocks, and this is something I think you can use without using all of Polymer, but it's definitely one of those things that Polymer provides that makes the experience of building and extending elements visually like really nice. So what that effectively lets you write is, let's look for the site menu button. So I've named everything as far as variables in this, like name of the tag, hyphen, whatever the thing it's providing is, and then hyphen like state or hyphen something, you know, more specificity as we go down. So like in this case, site menu button tooltip hyphen text is going to be the color of the tooltip text. Okay, so what the site menu button looks like as far as HTML is pretty minimal. So I got a link that goes somewhere, it doesn't know where, has a shared disabled state, and then it's got a paper button which shares the disabled state as well, has the ability to be raised or lowered, has a slot, two slots, one for prefix and suffix, and an icon, and then the tooltip. Let's look for site menu button. You see I have two site menu buttons that leverage the API of site menu button. But we can go up and see, okay, well there's site menu button. I have a hover, focus, and active state. And then in here, am I using those apply blocks? It effectively lets you do this. It's more or less it's like you copied this and pasted it wherever the site menu button is in this case. And so then the idea is you put those at the bottom of whatever the thing is that you want someone to have total development flexibility over that. And it'll let that happen. So you can see this is a pretty simple element, right? This is just, it's got a lot of CSS flexibility as far as people can do whatever the hell they want to it, but there's not a lot of HTML. So let's look at what the API for this element is. So I got properties, we have type, and we're noticing when type changes. That's basically going to drive the whole thing. I've got an active manifest index. I've got the router manifest down in here. I've got the link, disabled state, label, icon, position, and raised. So these are some more like visual or like API driven types of things as far as the design layer. But these other ones that are computed are going to cascade pretty heavily. So you're going to plug in, if we look down here, we've got type, there we go. Nope, that's for print button. Type next or prev, right? So is it a next button or a previous button? And now in this case, I've also overridden the label and the position to say, hey, position the tooltip above it, and the label should be next or previous. But the real magic happens all in this section here. So you notice I'm not defining a link. That's just happening on the fly. So what we'll see is we go, okay, well, type change, cool. Previous, so if it's previous, I need you to be, you know, chevron left unless the user defines something, so slash. Previous page, position things to the right. It's just set some initial stuff in motion. The real magic happens when we get connected to the page. So when we're connected to the page, this button's going to tie into the store, and it's going to say, hey, give me the router manifest when you do something with it, and then give me the active manifest index, right? So if you think of an array, that would be like P1, P2, P3. If the active item ID is P2, then I know I can go left or right. If it's P3, I know I can't go right, I can only go left. And so that's more or less how we're leveraging that information. So router manifest, and then coupling that with Polymer lets you do these computed properties. So we're saying link is computed based on knowing what the type is, knowing what the active index is, where I am in that array, and then having the array of items to do something with. So if we look at PageLink, PageLink is going to say, okay, all right, are you previous? Yes, so that previous link. Do you have items that I can work on? Awesome. Okay. Then I need you to go, all right, is the active manifest index greater than 0? That's just like a sanity check, basically. Because you can technically have a manifest index of -1, just saying like, hey, you're not actually on a node in HAXcms, right? That might be just like a custom route in your theme. So let's say items passed in, active manifest index -1. So if there's something to the left of me, then I need that link to be the location of whatever's to the left of me. Then the same for next in reverse, right, to the right of me. Then we combine that with the page link status. So page link status says, am I allowed to go previous and am I allowed to go next? They're two different questions. And then that computes the disabled state. And so when you combine these things, right, and remember in the slide theme before, it's just the button. There's no state with this. It's just the button state is all self-contained. That is how I can jump themes. That's a hard one to do it in because I have theme swapping going. Okay, that is how this button is disabled right now. It knows the active index of HAXcms is on page 0 here, page 1, and then this is how it's updating the link every time I click. And so you as the platform design, the person that wants to put out a really awesome visual system, why do you need to care what's next? Right? Like why do I need to calculate what that link is? I know what that link is. Everybody knows what that stinking link is based on knowing what the hierarchy is. And so we just leverage this hierarchy, which this hierarchy is stored in a format called JSON outline schema. So we just leverage the bat snot out of that. So I'm opening it up here. So this is what JSON outline schema looks like. It's got, hey, there's a site name. Here's some metadata that we leverage. This is where the theme data is stored. So as the bootstrap is loading up and it's like, hey, what do I look like? It uses this to dynamically import the theme and then place that theme element on the page. So there's the theme, some publishing status, dynamic element loader. This allows the page to load the definition of the web component on the fly. So for example, if you have a site and it doesn't have any Ali GIF player usage, it'll never get loaded into the end user's thing. As soon as someone puts an Ali GIF player on a page, like so if I go to this page and then I do make, and then I type accessible GIF, and I don't even know if I have any GIFs anywhere. I don't. Just upload any file, it'll be fine. If I just throw a GIF onto the page, there we go, because it's to click play. That now that tag exists, it'll dynamically load at runtime. So now if I open an incognito window and I go to this page, that definition is there. But if I was to go to a different page and load, and you'd look at the resources, it wouldn't actually load the Ali GIF player. So there's also field definitions. I don't know if we'll get there today. This can go on forever. But so there's the items. So this is how it knows how to go back and forth between things. And then there's always a reference to the content of the node in question. And then that's how you end up getting your site flow. So that is, imagine now, we keep hammering on, we've made 168 elements, but that's just element repos. Like the HAXcms elements library here is available on webcomponents.org, but I assure you it's way more than one custom element. It's 20 or so. So looking at a couple other ones, right? This is how we get like our dot indicator. So that dot indicator has all its state contained. It's just going to show up. You just worry about theming it. Same with our print buttons. Print buttons can be like, hey, type is site, and so then that'll know how to print the whole site, right? And again, we're not saying that you have to use these different buttons. It's just these are reusable patterns that exist in every design that's ever been made anywhere. Like, you put the client's first name over to the left. Like, that's, as long as you have a field that stores client first name, then it's not a big deal. If you look at like minimalist theme doesn't even include state, and actually its template is even abstracted. So to our to the mix-ins conversation with these superclasses, we actually have a superclass extending a superclass. So you can just start, mixing these things together as long as you're doing it the right way. In the case of this one, it's actually pulling the template. So the minimalist template defines a template for the page. So if I go and look at it in its superclass, it has a template that has all of this data here. What's cool about this then, and I haven't leveraged this to the fullest yet, but Minimalist Template has effectively abstracted CSS away from the web components and the HTML, if you will, of what I'm mocking up here. And so it's put it in a space where it's not tied to a platform. Now, this specific one is doing Polymer style data binding syntax. So if I wasn't extending Polymer, this one would screw up. But I think it's an interesting potential paradigm here is if I were to go to Minimalist again, you can see that Minimalist then is basically just skinning that material. It's just supplying CSS. And then it's saying, oh, and by the way, put the template there. So this is just how much we can abstract away from front-end developers. These I mean, like look at this theme. It's just CSS and HTML, which sit in two separate files. Our custom theme actually allows you to write CSS and HTML in two separate files on the fly, and then it uses fetch to pull them in and build the theme dynamically. Now it's pretty rough, but just to glance what the future is here. Theme.html, there we go. So if all the state is constrained in these tags themselves, that also provides greater security, right? If you go and get a theme from someone else that is, for HAXcms, that doesn't exist yet, but it will. You get a theme from another user. If they're leveraging all of the internal tags and they're just styling them differently, you're effectively guaranteeing security is constrained within what it is that is, within the core of the system. So obviously we want people to be able to make new themes and extend state, but how many blogs are really that different fundamentally? How many blogs, if you didn't just go like, I just want it to look like a blog, that you just would go and select a different looking blog, and it would present your material that way. And you might think that things like fields are a differentiator between like traditional CMSs and what we're doing, but this supports fields and and builds them via UI, which you can then leverage here and say like, oh well, yeah, let me add some tags to this page. Let me upload some sources of media in this case. So I'll upload an image associated with this, put in some alt data, add a subtitle. That this field information is tied into just the site that I'm making. And so now that I've leveraged that field, this is a theme that actually uses fields if they're available. So you see that top of the post didn't have this giant header image, and then I just uploaded it and it put login over top of it. So what just happened in that instance with as it relates to HAXcms is that's using simple blog. And so let me find simple blog here. So simple blog is not so simple. I always love to joke with Nikki that like things that are called simple typically are not. So here's the post that you're viewing in that before. So this has a lot of state to it. it has the active title, and then down here beyond our CSS, there we go. We do some detection and say, well, if it has an image, then render the image. And we can go down, drill down in there and say, well, what has an image? Oh, well, compute if it has an image based on the store saying whether or not it has fields. If it has fields, check and see if one of those fields is an image, which it then looks and goes, oh, in the fields I was handed, do you have images? And then do you have a first image uploaded? And does it have an SRC? If so, then yes, we have an image. And so that's how, when I switch over to another post, see, it's bumped right up against the top. There's no image defined there. But it's also how I get the rocket fast performance of whenever I do upload something in here. Put in some alt data. Yes, I would put in real alt data if it was a real site. That we get that, right? So this, when you hit save, that message goes to the backend. It just it updates a little bit of JSON, comes back around and refreshes the index, which updates the store. The store updates the fact that you're on this book page based on the ID, and then that indicates to that element, oh, by the way, there's an image in the field area now. And then it just re-renders a template. So pretty awesome rockin' stuff in HAXcms's theme work. The custom theme that's being worked on in Eberly College of Science in this system is just unbelievable when you realize it's a static site. It is so incredibly enjoyable to style and work with. Mostly because, like, if I step into a basic theme has some of this going on as well. So there we go. It's got, oh, I want the breadcrumb, and Chuck's putting a breadcrumb. Why? Well, because like every website has a breadcrumb. So just there's a breadcrumb, and it has baseline styling, and then tons of CSS variables, and you can override it. But all the state of that is abstracted away. Whether it's accessible modals, and then we just say, well, just throw whatever you want in the modal. Whether it's, hey, generate a block that has all the children of the current page in it, and that is a fun one because that delves into what I think is a views killer if you're familiar with Drupal lingo. If I go to site children block pulls in the store, and it pulls in a menu slice query. So you can make tags that are highly semantic in web components, but that aren't actually visual tags. So this particular non-visual tag can take in an array of items and then based on criteria, slice it up and then spit back out item data that you can then leverage. So what the site queries look like, and query is, I'll go with query because it's a little less absurd than the menu slicer. Menu slicer is a bit much for now. So this takes in criteria and then leverages the store to spit back out the results. And so the store, if you think of that as like your database that basically has the whole hierarchy of your site, we just go and tie into the store and say, hey, give me the manifest and give me what's active. Okay. And then in the site query tag, let's find a usage directly of site query. There's fields, active title, no, render item, no, there's a lot of elements here now. Outline block. Oh, you know what top items is? Top items is a great example. Layout. Nope, sorry, that's in navigation. There we go. And then top menu. Okay, so this is the top menu of a site, right? It's got your highest level items. So again, lots of CSS selectors, some baseline styles. Site query. Sort everything based on what we're saying to sort by. We default to ascending. So order everything in ascending order. And then the conditions by default, like you can override these, but the conditions are parent is null, which if you think of a hierarchy, the things at the top of the hierarchy don't have a parent. They're just attached to the outline. They form the outline. And so this is saying sort the items in ascending order, right, which would be an order flag in the items that say like what order they're in the hierarchy. And then give it conditions of doesn't have a parent. And then what the site query tag says is, oh, you told me order, and then the condition is doesn't have a parent, and then this two-way data binded item here of results is going to spit back just the top level links. Then in your template here, I can use a DOM repeat tag, which iterates over this and then template stamps this over and over again. And so this little block right here is all the logic that I need in order to correctly print the top items of the site. So one of the designs using that tag is, I believe it's simple, it's not simple blog, or basic site. So that is how you end up getting this. Right? Imagine that you just style the arrow indicator, and you space the items, and you worry about color, and then when you want to update the items that are in that list, it's as easy as just entering new items, and it just updates the template. That's what we're constructing here. You don't need to think about these silly state management things. There's a slice query, and the slice query in this case is saying this block is set to say, as long as what you're viewing has an ancestor that is common, keep it there. And so let's refresh this page. You'll see you'll see Apache reload the old version. There we go, because I was trying to cache it. So when I reload to there, you'll see the arrow comes over and says, oh, well, you're on this page. And so I'll go to this page. You see that active indicator flag went away. Select that. Breadcrumb trail updates. Click, and I can go back and forth between these, and all the rest of that stuff updates. Knowing, just know that everybody's just saying, hey, active ID, change, active ID, you changed. That this menu goes, okay, but is it still in the same hierarchy? Like, who's the ancestor, right? All of these pages have a common ancestor of this, this home thing that I bricked the label on. And so as a result of that, it just keeps the menu here. And so I think you're going to see some pretty ridiculous stuff coming out of this project pretty soon as we start to stamp out more and more sites. For example, I made a site for WC Factory the other day. And so wcfactory.js.org now exists. And so let's plug the link in there so people can find it. There we go. So now this is a HAXcms site. This is a fully offline capable progressive web app that communicates the terms that we use in WC Factory. It has linked to our tutorial videos and how to start contributing. And I will grant you, this site doesn't look, like anything gorgeous. But it took, I believe, 4 minutes to produce. So there is a just blinding level of scale of capability with this, as well as design flexibility. If I want to push out a change and alter that site, right, I'm working all in the same patterns as what I just showed before. The site knows that it's published, so I could jump to the published version. Or I could be like, I don't like the learn site. That doesn't make sense for this concept. Switch it over to documentation, and then I could just go and, I don't know why I opened the window down there so low. Always like a good glitch right before we're about to shut off. Okay, publish. And then it's going to republish this now. My content hasn't had to change. My style changes, or my design changes. This is a lighter weight design, both visually, and there's a lot less tags involved in this one because I'm aware of how it's constructed. Hey, click to access factory. Jump over there, and it might not notice it instantly. We'll see. It just depends on when GitHub CDN updates. Let's see. Oh, hey, service worker. Hey, there's new content. Reload. There we go. Now that, and that's live. I mean, I hadn't tested this earlier. I don't need to anymore because this pipeline just works. So now we have our sustainable, easy to update, incredibly flexible design layer that has state abstracted away, and now we can build and rapid prototype and iterate way faster than we ever thought possible with the web. So thank you for tuning in. Hope to meet up. I'm going to be presenting on web components, some of this related stuff at DrupalCon Seattle 2019. But if you have any questions about Hax, Hax Editor, HAXcms, web components in general, just hit me up on the Twitter webs. I'm at BTOPro, or you can check us out at haxtheweb.org. Although apparently you can check us out at wcfactory.js.org now too. Sweet.